Welcome to Expedition Networking, a special segment of the Networking RX podcast. I'm Frank Agan, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections, and your host for this program. For those of you who are familiar, on the Networking RX podcast, we share information and have conversations with experts, such as authors, researchers, and social scientists. And all of these programs are aimed at helping you learn how to become better at building professional relationships and understanding why they work. In this Expedition Networking segment, however, we're going to bring on successful entrepreneurs and unique professionals and explore their networking adventure and learn how they used relationships to create lasting success. Today on Expedition Networking, we have John Ramstead. He is a keynote speaker, trainer, former combat Navy fighter pilot, leadership coach, international podcast host, and author. John was at the peak of his professional career 9 years ago when his dreams were shattered by a freak accident. He'll certainly tell us about that. 23 surgeries and almost 2 years of medical care later, John has emerged with a profound vision for how to live a life of significance. Since then, his passion has been to coach and mentor hundreds of individuals and companies to realize their true potential and just take advantage of their full potential. John, welcome to the program.
Frank, great to be here, my friend. I always enjoy spending time with you.
Likewise. Let's jump into this. Can you kind of give us your story? Navy pilot, great. Thank you for your service. I think a lot of times when people get into the Navy, it's your network is kind of defined for you, and you set on a whole new path once you get out. I guess take us through your journey. You've got this. You have a book coming out. You got a successful business. How did it all happen?
Okay, so here, I'll give you the overview, and then we can kind of maybe dig into some places. But you're right. So the movie Top Gun comes out in 1986. I'm in college as a junior in college under a Navy scholarship. So I decide that, you know what, I'm going to give it a go at flight school. And they tell us 1 out of every 10,000 people are going to get to fly a jet because of this movie made it so popular, right, to go into aviation. And, so here's something interesting, though. I'm get my orders. I'm heading down to flight school. And I was convinced, I just a lot of things growing up, low self-image, self-confidence doubts, that there's no way I'm 1 out of 10,000. And I'm heading down to flight school, Frank, and my dad says, you know what? He pulled me aside. He said, John, here's what I want you to do. When you get down there, you're going to find one person, another student, who everybody's talking about, this ace of the base. And you're not going to be competing with him because he's going to be ahead of you in these classes, the way that they choose. My dad was a Navy veteran in World War II. He goes, go find that guy, buy him a beer, and figure out what he's doing. Well, this guy turned out to be John Foster. And he shared with me, he freely shared everything that he was doing. And it was so radically different than what everybody else and how they were approaching flight training, preparing, mindset. And I asked him to be my mentor through this. Now, through that, I ended up graduating at the top of my class, number 1, all the way through. I got to choose F-14s. And I credit that, honestly, to not only my dad's advice, but going and finding people that have succeeded at what I want to do, looking at what they did, because he sacrificed beach time, right? We were in Pensacola, personal time, things like that. He'd go up to the base in the simulator and do things that, when other people didn't want to go. And then I had to ask myself, am I willing to do the work that he did to get the result? And then if my answer is yes, then I got to commit. So that's what I did. Taught me a lesson really early on, because fast forward 7 years later, I get orders to go to Top Gun after combat tours in Iraq. Totally excited. The next weekend, it's actually still a cautionary tale that they tell in flight school to this day, 20 years later. Mm-hmm. They're not allowed to play softball, because I was playing softball that next week and I got hit with a line drive in the eye and had nerve damage.
Oh, geez.
Lost my medical. I was done. I was out. Now, I had no networking skills, because you did not have to network in the Navy. You did what was in front of you, right? And especially Anyway, it wasn't a focus of mine at the time. I had no business skills. I had no sales skills. And I had an engineering degree that I had never used, and I couldn't fly anymore. The only job I could find other than virtually a minimum wage job at a technology company on a quality assistant assurance desk, which I could not take, I would have died,
right,
was in sales. And I got thrown into this environment where I had to start networking and meeting people, and I was not comfortable. And I did the same thing again. I actually found who was the best sales guy in this entire company. And I just said, what do they do? And you know what I found out is they didn't sell a thing. They were so great at having conversations with people. He gave me the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. You know what he told me? He goes, John, if you really want to do well, you need to start reading 10 pages a day in books that are going to help you become the best version of yourself so that you can serve others. Very simple advice, right?
Right.
Now, through that, I'll fast forward, that led to being the top. Within a year, I was the top sales rep in California for Pacific Bell Mobile. That was when digital cell phones were first coming out.
Yep.
Moved to Minnesota and ended up being part of 2 tech startups. Then went to a Fortune 100 tech company, and then to Wall Street. They moved me out here to Denver in 2008. And so I used all of these skills of networking and building relationships to honestly have some pretty incredible success in technology, in finance on Wall Street. And then 2011, I had an accident. I was up at a ranch, Frank, in Montana. It was a retreat for a nonprofit I was working with. And we were going to go ride to the back of this property and have lunch and get to know each other. There's about 15 people. I was really excited to meet these folks.
Right.
And I'm on this horse, and I was the first one saddled, and this horse starts trotting out into this big open area, and then he bolts and he takes off, and I'm laying flat on my back, and his rump is pounding me in the shoulder blades. And I did the one thing I could think of in the moment, and that's to squeeze as hard as I could with my legs so I wouldn't flip off the horse. And I did not know it at the time. Anybody who's a horse person out there is like probably cringing. I was telling the horse to go faster.
Oh, geez.
And he absolutely responded. That dude found another gear. I get my weight back up in the saddle, and we are accelerating to a flat out gallop, full run, straight at a series of steel corral fences that were now about 50 yards in front of us. I couldn't get him to turn. I couldn't get him to slow down. I absolutely started panicking. And I'll never forget, right in front of the fence, at a full gallop, wind in my hair, hooves thundering, I thought to myself very clearly, because none of this computed that it was happening, this is not going to end well. And that's the last thing I remember. So he bucked so hard, he flipped over coming into the fence. And when he did, he launched me, Superman, right into this top 3-inch rolled steel beam. So I crushed the whole left side of my skull. I broke 8 teeth. I broke every bone in my skull except my jaw and my right cheekbone. I broke my neck, shattered my shoulder. Next bar down, hit me in the rib cage, crushed my rib cage, and one of the broken ribs punctured my lung.
Wow. Wow.
So I don't remember that, thank goodness. I'm glad the brain doesn't work that way with such trauma.
Right.
But I did wake up on the ground into more pain that I could ever describe to anybody. And I'll never forget, because I had one of those near-death experiences. I wake up into this, you know that saying, God won't give you more than you can handle?
Right.
It's not true. I'll tell you that right now. And all of a sudden, as I'm beyond my breaking point, and we can dive into this if you'd like to, but God is standing right next to me. And he took away all the pain and panic and fear that I was in.
Wow.
And not only did he tell me that he was going to heal me, but I knew in that moment I was being given a second chance. Because, you know, my entire life was absolutely flipped upside down. I mean, I thought, you know, he told me he was going to heal me, but I thought it was going to be quick. Like I was texting from my hospital bed, and I was 5 weeks in ICU, and then 20 months at a recovery hospital that specialized in traumatic brain injury. I had a severe TBI. But I was convinced because of that encounter that, 2 weeks I'd be back at work.
Wow.
But here's what happened is, as I recovered very slowly, so now fast forward 2 years, 23 surgeries that you mentioned, I could work 8 to 10 hours a week because of all the damage and the brain injury. That's it. You and I would have a conversation, like let's say a networking conversation. I would have to go home and sleep for 4 hours.
Wow.
That's how much energy it just pulled out of my brain. I could not go back to work in the position I was in my company as a managing partner. And my income had been wiped out. I had a lien against me for medical bills. And I got to tell you, and this is why I love your focus on this. So I just on networking, because in my network, honestly, 2.5 years, other than close friends and some people that were coming around me, I hadn't talked, I hadn't been able to really have conversations for, at this point, almost 2.5 years. And I decide, what can I do with all my life experience? Well, I've had all these leadership roles. I've risen to the top of companies. I've been an entrepreneur. What I can do is become a coach, an executive coach. I can go help other leaders really connect to who they are. This was my big journey afterwards. I really wanted to shift my life from building something for myself to actually, being that person that helped others do that.
Right.
But I wanted to build a coaching practice. So here's what I started doing. I have a simple process that I've always followed. I think I'm a pretty simple guy, coming out of this is, would it be good to maybe kind of just share what I did that I repeated, that I've learned to maybe help other folks?
No, that was one of my questions. Is you talked about networking and building relationships. I really want to take a deep dive into that, or a little deeper dive into the nuts and bolts of that, if you will, please.
Yeah. So in general, what I found before the accident, oftentimes I would show up in a networking meeting or now in a Zoom room, right, with different folks.
Yep.
And I'd be looking across the crowd and say, who's that one person that could buy from me? Who's the one person that could open a door for me? And one of the things that always bothered me is when somebody was talking to me and they realized like I'm not their prospect.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they start looking around the room and they break off conversation.
Yep.
And I got to tell you, I'm like, I don't want to be that person.
Yeah.
And, and How to Win Friends and Influence People, he talks about taking that sincere interest in other people, asking questions. Some of these folks that on the surface that never appeared like and they couldn't, they would never be a client of mine as a coach. My goal was just to have, when I went to a networking event, and this was even leading up to the accident, I would show up and say, what my goal is, have 1 or 2 really deep, meaningful conversations, find any way that I can do to serve this person, add value. Maybe it's recommend a book or a course or a word of encouragement, or share a little bit of my experience and maybe a situation they were going through. And that developed into a relationship. But here's what I did. I was really intentional about this because I had when I moved to Denver in 2008, I was working for a Wall Street firm. They moved me from Minneapolis. I didn't know anybody here, and I had to build a practice quickly. And then we hit the whole financial storm that fall.
Right.
But here's my 3-step process. It's super simple. Is A, you have to figure out who it is you want to have a conversation with. Who is that ideal either client, or for me, it was a referral source.
Right.
I love to develop relationships with other people that have really deep, trusted relationships with their clients, customers, and friends. And if I can be a trusted resource to them, all of a sudden things start just flowing back and forth.
Okay.
Number 2 is I just had to figure out how to start the conversation. Like you and I, Frank, we didn't know each other. And I just reached out to you through LinkedIn because I saw you had a podcast.
Yep.
And we just started a conversation, and we jumped on and we talked. And I said, hey, I think I can add value to your audience. I'd love to share what I've been able to do in networking. And, it just starts from there. But number 3 is, and this is so important, you have to figure out how to keep the conversation going. So now here's what I did. When I would meet somebody, I would actually kind of put them in a category, an A, B, or a C. Now for me, an A is somebody that either is an ideal client or somebody that is a trusted advisor to their clients and they know how to refer, right? They're very collaborative.
Right.
A B would be somebody that I think could be an ideal client, or they also maybe work with clients who they could put me in front of. Okay. But I'm not sure yet. And I'm always trying to say, is somebody go from a B to an A, an A to a B, and a C is just somebody like at that networking meeting. And I talk with somebody and we spend 15, 20 minutes talking. And we had a really interesting, engaging conversation. And it's pretty clear to me that they could never hire me and they don't work with people, but I just enjoyed the conversation. Well, that would be a C, because that's somebody I don't want to lose touch with.
Right.
Here's what I did. I put them at first, I tracked this all in a spreadsheet, and then I used a CRM. But my A's, I wanted to reach out and touch base every 2 weeks. It was very intentional. My B's was once a month, and my C's was once a quarter, because I'd be willing to bet if everybody listening went back and looked at their calendar over the last year, especially if you're looking at 9 to 12 months ago,
yep,
and you look at names of people you talked to, you're like, oh my goodness, that was such a great conversation with Frank, and I haven't talked to him in a year. I introduced you to a friend of mine, and you guys knew each other, and you hadn't talked in 2, 3, 4 years.
Yeah.
I think you met once and got busy and never really followed up. And it happens, right? So here's what I would do though for those touch points. The first one is, my goal was constantly to just add value and serve them. I knew that if I could add enough value and serve them, that everything else would flow from that. I have never pushed for referrals or sales. I feel like that's not the business that I'm in. My business is in building relationships and adding value. So, and there's probably more ways to do this than the 4 I came up with. But the first one is, and it's super simple, is what I call the value-based email. So I'd really get to know somebody. Like, as a matter, like one of the guys I met, his daughter was wanted to be on the U.S. Olympics team. She was in high school. She's doing really good for gymnastics, right? And his name pops up. And so I'm searching all over the internet, and I found this article from a sports performance coach on how important the sports psychology and gymnastics. And so I shoot it to Michael, and I said, hey, Michael, I came across this article. I think this would be, I know how involved you are with your daughter in gymnastics. Thought you'd enjoy this. Hope you're having a great week. All the best. Keep knocking them alive, John. That's it. It's not like, hey, let's get together. Hey, can you have me come in? I mean, he was CEO of a 500-person company, right? The other one is what I call a drop by, which we're doing less now. But as he and I started having conversations, there was a book that I thought could really be of value to him. It was called Leadership and Self-Deception. It's about our own internal self-talk. And I had mentioned that once in our conversation. So what I did was I ordered it from Amazon, had it shipped here, and I swung by his office to the front desk, and I just dropped in. This is before COVID. And I said, hey, is Michael here? And they said, and he came out, and he's like, do we have a meeting? I'm like, no, dude, I'm just in the area. And we talked about this book. I wanted to hand it to you. I think you'll really enjoy it, especially chapter 5. I actually highlighted some things in there based on our conversation. Right. I got to go. Have an awesome day. The other one is scheduling a meeting just to have a conversation and to get to know people.
Right.
Okay. And then the fourth one is, and this is something that I've used really effectively, and that's actually writing a personal handwritten note. So I'm choosing one of those 4 ways, and some of them I'm just humorous, right? Like St. Patrick's Day, I'll just send out a whole bunch of notes, say, hey, hope you wear green, even if you're not even Irish.
Right.
Right. Enjoy St. Patrick's Day. I mean, just little things like that. And then the B's, I would just do that once a month. And then the C's, I would make sure once a quarter. And a lot of those were just emails.
Sure.
And oftentimes that would just lead to conversations. And then in those conversations, especially as we started developing, some good rapport, oftentimes I tried to keep the conversations 80% on them versus me and what I'm doing.
Right.
But you know what? People love to reciprocate.
They do. Yeah.
At the end of the conversation, you're like, dude, this is so, I really appreciate how helpful you've been. What can I do to help you?
Yep.
And there's 2 questions at the end of the conversation that I'd always ask that have opened more doors, created more opportunity that we even have time to discuss in that podcast. And this is it. The first one is, let's say I shared with you, hey, you know what? My book is about to come out, Frank. And out of that book, here's how everybody's using it, coaches and companies, and people are buying it. And so here's some of my goals. I would love to know your thoughts and any advice you might have for me. So I share with people what I'm trying to accomplish. Like one of those, when I just asked for advice and he goes, hey, have you ever presented to this group? It's a group of about 100 CEOs that get together every month. I think you'd be a great speaker. I said, no, I've never heard of him. He goes, well, I know the guy that organizes it. Why don't I put you in touch? Well, he put me in touch. I spoke to that group, and out of that, I got 3 new clients out of it. And that was just from asking somebody who'd become a friend, what advice do they have for me? I never said, hey, what speaking opportunities do you think I should get in front of? And the second question is, and it's just a nice, easy way to ask for introductions, is, hey, is there anybody you think would be good for me to have a conversation with? That's it. And sometimes they're like, nah. Or like, well, what do you mean? Who would be good for you to have a conversation with? I think that's why it's really important for us to kind of know who might be good for us to talk to.
Yeah.
Or sometimes I'm a little bit more directive. Let's just say if I'm looking at my network, and like when I was in financial services, and I knew that business attorneys, M&A attorneys were really good for me. And let's just say I'm talking to a CPA. And we developed a good rapport. I'd even ask him, hey, are there any good M&A attorneys that could handle this kind of situation, right? Selling a family deal or an ESOP, something really specific that you would really trust if that was your client situation. He goes, oh yeah, you got to call Bob. He's the only guy I trust for that. He goes, I'd love to talk with Bob, buy him lunch, and right. And all of a sudden, but now through that, when I could literally work 8 to 10 hours a week building my coaching business, my passion was to help leaders connect to their purpose, become the best version of themselves, and bring that out into their organizations. I've seen transformation everywhere, but that's not what I was leading with. I was in the beginning, Frank, I could have 1 or 2 conversations. Like I would get up, I'd go downtown, I'd schedule 2 meetings, one at 8:30 for an hour for coffee. This is after my accident when I'm just getting back into it. And I'd have to go to my car and sleep for an hour. And then I'd have a second conversation from 9:30 or from 10:30 to 11:30. And then I'd literally have to go home and sleep for a day and a half because remember, my network was dormant. I was starting from a dead stop.
Yeah.
And then that was on a Tuesday. And then I would try to have 2 meetings on a Thursday morning. That is literally all I could do. And out of that, at the end of a year, I had 14 coaching clients, and we were making as much month as money. How's that? And I got to tell you, but the rewards from focusing on people, getting to know them, what's important to them, what makes them tick, and just stepping into that place where you can serve them has just opened up such a richness in this part of my life I didn't have before, of deep relationships and close friends and a network of people that, we had hundreds and hundreds of people sign up to be on my book launch team. And I think it's because it's just become my habit over the last 7 years as I've really gotten into this realm to just serve people without the expectation of reciprocity. But what I found is that reciprocity just happens because of how it's been modeled to me by some other amazing people, how I show up.
Wow. So, John, I really, we're about out of time here. I really appreciate your time on the program. This is, I've got a bunch of notes here. Best way to get a hold of you, LinkedIn? That's how we connected. I would assume
LinkedIn, and also I'd love for people. My new book is coming out, On Purpose with Purpose, and everything there is at my website, beyondinfluence.com. That's the name of the company.
Okay.
Beyondinfluence.com/book. The book comes out live April 27th, drops on every bookseller. So that's our big push now, and love for people to read it. I really think it would help them, like me, just kind of get to that next level in life where you're just having a lot more fun.
Okay. Well, appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you.
To wrap things up, remember, we're looking for some enterprising business types to join our team as franchisees of AmSpirit Business Connections. Our franchisees work with entrepreneurs, sales representatives, and professionals in their area to help them become more successful through networking and the exchange of quality business referrals in a structured weekly morning meeting. This is a unique franchise opportunity, you see, because these meetings are in the morning. A successful business type or professional can add this franchise opportunity onto what they're already doing. Again, all of our franchisees do something else. For a couple hours in the morning, a few mornings a week, these franchisees work the AmSpirit Business Connections model. The rest of the time, they're attorneys, accountants, realtors, coaches, and consultants of various kinds. The wonderful thing is that not only do our franchisees realize a financial gain from operating the AmSpirit Business Connections model, but the business networks that they build and develop become a great source of referrals for their primary business as well. Perhaps you know someone, perhaps you are that someone. Whatever the case, to learn more about the AmSpirit Business Connections franchise opportunity, please contact me using the email in the show notes or the one we provide at the end of this program.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.